Good morning and welcome to our next edition of Science Business Research Futures webcast. My name is Carlos Hertel. I'm Director at Science Business, and our topic today is COVID and production. How should industry respond? There's two challenges that I think we have all heard of and followed in the news that relate to industrial production in the midst of this crisis. The first one is, as a consequence of strict disease control measures, some global supply chains have almost collapsed. Many have been affected. And there's companies as well as countries worried about the resiliency that they have, the future risks that come from unexpected events, and if potentially bringing production closer to home is a potential remedy against such risks, a way to mitigate those risks. But there, of course, is the question of commercial viability of such approaches. The second thing that we've all seen is that countries, even with quite sophisticated manufacturing industries, were struggling to get the required supplies in terms of protective equipment and critical care equipment as well, which makes you wonder, is there more flexibility needed in industrial manufacturing systems to allow for changing production to important supplies in such cases of enormous crisis? These are the questions that we would like to discuss with our distinguished guests on the panel, and let me introduce them. I start out with Julia Arlinghaus from the Fraunhofer Society in Germany. Julia is director of the Institute for Factory Operation and Automation and is also a professor at the University of Magdeburg. Her research interests are all around Industry 4.0 and the future of industrial manufacturing. From the European Commission, we're happy to welcome Peter Dröll, who is director of the division Prosperity at the Directorate General for Research and Innovation, and he is responsible for the EU's research programs covering industrial technologies. And the third panelist today is Ramon Pastor, Vice President and General Manager of HP's 3D printing business, which is actually run out of Barcelona in Spain. 3D printing, often called additive manufacturing, is a key component of what some people call digital manufacturing systems. And that certainly is something that we will hear more of in the future. I will be moderating today's panel together with my colleague Marilyn Fiaschi. Marilyn is Science Business Managing Director, and she will kick off with questions to Peter, but also she will give a quick overview of Science Business. And with this, over to you, Marilyn.
Hello, and thank you, Carlos. I have to apologize. The gardeners have suddenly decided to cut the grass around my house. So if there is a bit of background noise, I'm really sorry. I hope it doesn't take too long. So Science Business first. We are a news and communications company specialized in research and innovation policy in the EU and around the world. We also run a network that brings together 70 organizations, including multinationals, leading research universities, and government agencies that all share the same interest, meaning accelerate innovation in Europe. I should say that Fraunhofer is a member of the network. In the context of the COVID crisis, Science Business has deployed huge efforts to bring the global research community together and get the intelligence it needs to manage the crisis better and faster. We have launched since March several initiatives, and I mentioned that to you because while you are watching, you may want to take a look at the website. There is nothing that prevents you to do so. There's a live blog, a live R&D blog around COVID-19. There is a database of funding opportunities around the world. And we've also launched this series of live webcasts around hot research topics around COVID-19. Today's webcast is the fourth of the series. There is actually more to come, since tomorrow we will be launching the so-called Coronavirus R&D Gateway that will gather everything that Science Business has been doing, but also it will also feature some initiative from partner organizations. So watch the space. A final word on logistics. During the webcast, you who are following the debate online, you will be able to ask questions to the speakers using Twitter. You just need to tag Science Business, and the Science Business handle is Scibus, SCIBUS, and using two hashtags. The first hashtag is SB Futures, and the second hashtag is COVID-19. My colleagues are monitoring the Twitter activity, and I will be asking questions to the three speakers. All right, let's get started by setting the policy scene with you, Peter. So as Carlos said, I mean, you are the director in charge of prosperity, but it's probably worth explaining that you're actually in charge of industrial research and technologies, in DG Research and Innovation at the European Commission. The COVID crisis arrives at a very critical time in the policy-making process. We are approaching the end of the 7-year budget cycle, and member states haven't yet agreed on, or fully agreed on, the ground to launch the next framework program for research, Horizon Europe. So we want to know what it means for production and manufacturing research, or research around manufacturing. So we'll come back to Horizon Europe in a second, but looking at the instruments in place, is there room for maneuver under Horizon 2020 to boost or to help boost production in Europe and contribute to the economic recovery?
Thank you, Marilyn, and good morning to everyone. Yes, there is room for maneuver. We are moving in a rather complex environment. The shock is big, huge. We have seen a huge momentum for research and innovation as a response to the crisis. And as Commission, we have not only opened up the state aid framework very quickly so that national measures can be taken, also for manufacturing, for testing, which is a new element in the state aid rules. But not only that, we have also mobilized substantial additional resources under the current framework program, Horizon 2020. And these were targeted at vaccine treatment and diagnostics or testing, with money which was repurposed, remobilized. And the overall amount, you have heard the pledging event, heard about that of 4th of May, led to an overall EU commitment of 1 billion as a corona response. More concretely on manufacturing, we all see, and Carlos mentioned it in his introduction, that we are more vulnerable than we thought, and there is a big need for more flexibility. And we are currently preparing an additional action, a call under our framework program Horizon 2020 on projects, calling on projects about repurposing on manufacturing to be more flexible, more agile, and to come to a quick response in times of shock and crisis.
In the very short term, is there anything in the field of manufacturing, really? Is there anything that you would be launching soon?
Yeah, so hopefully this week we will publish a call in the order of 20 million dedicated exclusively to the repurposing of manufacturing. Our objective is to get solutions, very ambitious solutions, for 48-hour demonstrator to repurpose production lines for the production of medical equipment, diagnostics, so masks, diagnostics based on advanced materials and biotech, and also vaccine production. So there is a second element of this call with an additional budget of some 30 million dedicated to digital innovation hubs and artificial intelligence, also on manufacturing, because we know that the production needs are tremendous and our production capabilities are not yet capable of meeting these demands. Imagine what we would need to produce once we have a vaccine. And we see already now that the production of masks in some member states is really difficult. So this is about repurposing, and it's one first step, because our concern is that this will not be the last shock. It's not only about pandemics. So we need to move to a more flexible, agile manufacturing system. And the big problems here are not just the technical problems. It's also about certification standards, the regulatory aspects. And here we want to make a link with the open innovation testbeds we have launched under Horizon 2020.
Very good, thank you. Let's look ahead now, and beyond Horizon 2020, let's look at Horizon Europe. Concretely, does the COVID crisis reshuffle priorities for Horizon Europe, in particular in terms of industry participation in the program?
Yeah, I think nothing remains untouched in this current crisis. And the crisis has also shown that nothing is impossible. So I mentioned this mobilization under Horizon Europe already, but let me make one point very clear. This will not be at the expense of the important transitions and transformations we need, and what the von der Leyen Commission has started with its Green Deal agenda. So the recovery package, which the Commission will soon propose, probably together with a new proposal for the Multiannual Financial Framework for the EU, the budget for the years 2021 to 27, will focus on this double transition, the twin challenge of digital, and now we all know how important digital is, and the green transition. And so the point I want to make is that we will not deviate from this transition target. And from the research and innovation perspective, we will also come with an additional Green Deal call still this summer to move forward and contribute to the recovery with the green transition.
All right, but stretching the question a little bit, is there, I mean, does COVID, the COVID context, does it change anything in the way the Commission envisages the future industrial partnerships?
Yeah, we are working on quite a series of partnerships in a new way. You know, Horizon Europe, the new framework program for the next years, has the ambition to be co-created. And we have co-created the areas for partnerships and have streamlined them. And for manufacturing, one area which is already well established is about manufacturing, and the title is Made in Europe, which also shows our ambition to keep technological leadership in manufacturing, super important for our economy and society. And under this partnership, there is an important element on flexibility, on agility, on using automation to be less exposed to shocks, to see how we can deal with re-identification of supplies and supply chains in times of interruption. So this partnership can make a very important contribution. And our ambition is to still put on our websites in May the research and innovation agendas of these partnerships. There are some 40 areas, and a lot, by the way, in the area of health as well, for a public debate on these priorities, so that by the time we have a budget and the framework program, the new framework program adopted, we can launch these partnerships and be very fast to get them running.
So hold on, Peter, just to clarify, are you speaking of new partnerships?
Yeah.
In addition to those that have been in the work so far?
No, I'm not speaking of new partnerships. We have screened the partnerships and the areas we agreed with the Parliament and member states. and came to the conclusion that they cover quite well the areas in need. For instance, there is a partnership envisaged for infectious diseases. We have a partnership for health EU-Africa. We have a proposal, an idea for innovative medicine and innovative health. So we can build on these partnerships, which are also quite prominent in the industrial strategy the Commission adopted just before the Corona crisis this year. So the only open question we see is, would we need an additional partnership on pandemics, on preparedness? And this could be something, but not for the first year in 21, 22, because we will use now the tools we have and the flexibility we have with the program, and need to see with member states, with the partners, how we can prepare for the next shocks, including with a partnership.
All right, but I think that sets the scene pretty nicely. So Carlos, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Peter, for the good inputs here. I'll use your phrase to get started with technology and industry. I use your phrase, nothing is impossible, which I've used many times myself in different contexts these days. One of the things that seemed impossible for us was to have good business interactions without seeing each other face to face. So hopping on a plane for a 2-hour meeting, which turns out to be unnecessary since I have video conferencing capabilities. The technology was there, but it wasn't adopted for reasons unrelated to its deficiencies. The same is true for, and Julia may be able to make a brief comment on that as well, the same is true for universities who had basically in a fortnight to change from everything is on-site, on-premise, to we do everything remotely. Now, I'm not saying that all is well and everything went perfectly smooth, but it begs the question of, are we in a state also with industrial manufacturing where technology is further ahead than its adoption to an extent that the issues we see today might be overcome relatively quickly if we were just faster at adopting Industry 4.0 and related technology sets in our industrial production today? And with that question, I want to turn over to Julia and ask her, you have a very good overview of what goes on in that domain, Julia. Where would you say are things mature and it's just a matter of kind of like getting it done? And where would you say, well, there's still a lot of work to be done before this is ready for prime time? Julia, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, good morning to everyone. Maybe I want to answer your question by first briefly revisiting where European companies are right now, right? Peter said the shock is big. And I think the major part of the companies was not prepared to that situation where we have both the supply side and the demand side being, well, disrupted at the same time. So companies spent a lot of time on forecasting and planning all the different parts of it, right? The demand, the supply, the personal, all the financial resources. And they usually go back on historical data, but that was successful in the last years. This doesn't work anymore. So I think the biggest challenge that companies face nowadays is to deal with uncertainty. And this, of course, also includes political and regulative measures, incentivations, trade restrictions, and so on. So, well, in March, it was reported that 75% of the companies had major supply chain disruptions. And but what we can see now is that it's moving mainly to the demand side. And when I look, for example, in the mechanical engineering industry, still only 40% of the companies report that they have major disruptions, mainly coming from deliveries from China. And that, on the other hand, the demand is nowadays the bigger problem. So we expect something like sales going down up to 30%. And we can also see big influence on, for example, the logistics and transportation industry. Yeah? So in April, we have an increase of unemployment by something like 25%, which, well, this is really a harsh time, and we really expect bankruptcies increasing in Europe by something like nearly 20%. So what I want to say is that Corona is increasing the focus on cost decreases and efficiency increases ever more. And so in this sense, I think the activities that are being prepared right now towards increasing agility, flexibility are necessary, because the companies don't have the power right now to do these things and to also invest into a bigger, better resilience and better risk management. So let me now show you the relation to Industry 4.0. Well, of course, this is the vision of a totally connected and digitalized, automated, efficient industry. And I mean, nearly 10 years ago, when the term first emerged, it was something like the Holy Grail, right? It promised anything like efficiency gains up to 30%, better times to market, improved availability of resources, new products, all that, right? And I have to say, we are not as far on the road as we thought we would be in 2020. However, what is the reason behind, right? So the main problem is not the technology. The technologies that are all in the bundle of Industry 4.0, they have reached a complete new maturity level in the last 10 years. Of course, there's still a lot of research to be done, right? First of all, the application part, right? We use this term Industry 4.0, but we mean different technologies, we mean different application fields, we mean all the different industries, and we just sum it up here and ask, why is it not everywhere, right? So where we need some more research is linking the different technologies and apply it in a situation-specific, company-specific context. There we have to do some more work, and we have to see that from these existing technologies that are quite far, like for example, measuring and sensor technology, right? To improve, there's a lot of potential to improve product quality, safety, efficiency, to assist human beings in manufacturing, and in combination with, for example, robotics, in combination with intelligent IT systems, there is a lot of potential. And companies who have already managed the application, they report something like efficiency gains of 50%, which is unbelievable, right? And by combining these technologies, new opportunities emerge. Like there's another term, like the digital twin that everyone is talking about right now, or the predictive maintenance technology. These specific applications that need a lot of more work to be done. So, but in general, the technologies themselves, they are pretty major. So what is the reason that we are not where we expected to be? There's not only one Industry 4.0, and many medium-sized and small companies, they still operate quite good profit margins up to this crisis, right? After the financial crisis, they have maybe only now reached a profit level again. And they all share one problem. They have difficulties evaluating benefit and cost. And it's difficult to foresee what the benefits are on the one hand, and on the other hand, they may be at the level of Industry 2.0, like working with paper, or at the level of Industry 3.0, to say shortly, to work with Excel, but they have good products and they're successful. So, however, I don't want to say this is a good situation because digitalization and automation products, they take processes, they take a very long time. And the biggest danger I see and the biggest challenge we have here, I'm afraid that companies don't realize the urgency, that the global pressure will increase, and it is with every shock, and there will be more shocks to come. it will be more difficult to produce, and we need digitalization and automation if we want to keep manufacturing in Europe. So,
all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for that. So kind of a couple of takeaways, but I'll try to simplify those. Since handing over to Ramon, I want to focus on the, I would say, the issues with adopting things. It's certainly not I would say, a drop-in thing that you just say, I'll bring someone onto my shop floor. He comes with a bunch of boxes and a couple of cables, and all of a sudden my production is totally flexible and low cost and fully automated. So there's a set of technologies, some of them mature, some less, but you're certainly saying a lot more is mature than is broadly deployed today. So we could be further ahead, and this crisis plus other pressure factors may accelerate the transition to more advanced manufacturing systems. Now, I want to hand over to Ramon at this point and ask, some things that are mature or close to maturity or certainly good enough for a range of applications don't get adopted for reasons that sometimes have to do also with a lack of familiarity with technology. And I mean, I have my own experience with 3D printing, or additive manufacturing, as it's called, from my days at a large global corporation. And our attempts to bring it into practice was often met with, well, I think it's something for prototyping. I don't need a prototyping machine anymore. I have one already. So Ramon, I mean, share with us your experiences in trying to bring 3D printing onto the industrial shop floor much more broadly than it's being deployed today.
Yeah, certainly. For 3D printing, and I think you said it very well, the belief until now, and 3D printing is a technology that has more than 30 years. The belief until now is that this was basically for prototyping. And this was a reality based on the performance of the technology until very recently. So it was expensive, slow, the mechanical properties of the parts were not actually to the manufacturing levels, but this has changed, and this has changed dramatically in the last years as new technology comes, and this technology get these to maturity levels where they can today actually be very economical to short runs, even runs up to hundreds of thousands of parts versus injection molding. And basically they get to the robustness level of what you need to put on the factory floor and deliver production, which is 24/7 at high levels of OE and manufacturing predictability, getting parts to certain dimensional accuracies with high CDK. So today, and Julia has set up the stage very well, the problem is not technology. The problem now is adoption. Once you have the technology at the minimum viable level to go into manufacturing, what you need to overcome is all these adoption cycles. First, the customers, the companies, they need to be aware that this change on technology has happened. Second, they need to figure out what is the value proposition for them. What is going to be the advantage for them to adopt this, in the case of 3D printing, additive manufacturing technologies? Is this going to help them on time to market? Is this going to enable them to do new designs that are more efficient? Is this going to enable them to go into new applications, to produce products, to go into this segment of one that now everybody's talking about? Is this going to help them actually to redesign their supply chain, to go to much more distributed manufacturing, to basically be able to match demand and supply, something that all of us actually is having problems with. You never have accurate forecasts, you never know the mix, you have a lot of SKUs, you never know which ones are going to be successful. So the part of value proposition, I'm basically convinced on the value of Industry 4.0 as a general, additive manufacturing in particular, is key. And once you have done this, then the adoption cycle of the different verticals of different industry kicks on. And basically the adoption cycle for aerospace is much longer than the adoption cycle, for instance, of consumer goods. And all of this usually starts with a spark. And I view all this crisis of coronavirus, as hard as it can be, as a spark. We've seen with this COVID crisis the limits of the traditional supply chain. And the traditional supply chain that are very, very efficient, very cost effective, but they really work when you have a stable demand and a stable supply. And what we have seen is actually the limits. And Peter and Julia has done a very good job showing this. You have had spikes in demand of medical devices that nobody was foreseeing. And you have had disruption of supply, where basically the traditional suppliers have seen their factories shut down and not being able to supply. And this is where 3D printing really has helped a lot. Just to put a number of examples, we in HP, with a big factory in Barcelona, for instance, dedicated to R&D mainly, we have shifted actually from one day to another our production and begin to do medical devices together with our partners. In the last weeks, we have produced more than 1.5 million parts to local hospitals and enabling designs that we actually have delivered as a free source. We have begun to do personal equipment, personal protection equipment, parts for respirators that actually we have helped also to design swabs. To put another example, the swabs, the swabs, which are basically these little sticks that you need basically to do this COVID test. This has been, again, we've seen a spike of demand, and the major supplier of swab, that actually is an Italian company, was shut down because of COVID. And this is a great showcase on how 3D printing has sparked this. We learned about the need actually in the US. That was Thursday that we actually had a call from one of the hospitals in the Boston area. This was a Thursday. By Friday, we had the first design that actually we sent to this hospital. By Wednesday of the following week, we had the okay of the FDA, the American Health Authority, to be able to produce 3D printing parts. And then the Thursday after, so it's only 1 week after we had the first notice, we started the clinical trials that actually last for 2 weeks. And now we have put together a new supply chain that is able to produce millions of swabs per day. So it's basically mind-blowing. This usually in normal conditions will take months. It's true that the crisis also is accelerating all the certification processes, but it's a great example how you cannot actually pivot a supply chain, establish a factory, and be able to do something that is totally different that you were doing. We actually are monitoring the usage of our devices, of our customers. We saw in the first weeks of COVID hit in Europe a 25% decrease in usage. Again, factories were shut down. But 2 weeks later, actually the usage was bigger than pre-COVID, because a lot of these factories have opened. They didn't have demand for the usual products, but actually they have pivoted the production to something totally new. And again, the fact of 3D printing being able to do distributed printing, to be very near with where demand is, know really where the demand is, and being able to repurpose this is huge. For me, the big question after we come out of COVID is basically how all this experience will accelerate the adoption of these tools, how different companies will rethink what does it mean to have a resilient supply chain. We all knew that it was important to have business continuity plans. All of us, HP as a big company, had business continuity plans for all the factories. They have failed miserably. They have failed. Because we thought that business continuity plans means to have a factory in China and maybe another one in Malaysia. So there is a flood in China, the Malaysia factory can, nobody was predicting this. So really the resilience now has a new meaning, which means actually to be very near to where demand is and be able to repurpose your production lines to really what the customers, and I think that this will help us from experience on how actually to design better supply chains. For the industry in particular, is basically a shocking period to really evaluate new ways to manufacture, new, more efficient ways to manufacture.
Thank you, Ramon. So I hear I would say a rays of hope from both what Julia said and what you have said. there is I would say, a level of readiness for new technologies to be deployed if needed that is maybe higher than many people do think, which of course brings up the question, what can we do on the framework, on the boundary conditions to accelerate it? The experience of the crisis is going to be a push by itself. But yet, there are boundary conditions who need to be formed. And maybe that's a question kind of like to Peter, but before I go to Peter and give him a chance to say what he thinks also policy and framework programs and so on can do to make that transition even faster, there may be questions from our online audience that we just checked with Marilyn.
There is actually a question. There are two questions. Maybe I'll ask them both, and probably Peter will come in as well. The first one is, well, so Julia and Ramon, you've been, you mentioned a number of challenges. So what do you expect from policymakers at both the EU level and national level? This is the first one.
Let me allow to reframe that question. I would say, I mean, given what we have today in terms of funding programs, I would reframe it as: are we looking too much at technology and not enough at adoption or demonstration of technology in industry? Allow me to hijack that question a little bit, and that goes to Julia. Are we too tech focused and on writing papers and not enough on transitioning it in? With programs that push that, be very welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I pointed that out already, that we have to not talk about Industry 4.0 as a general bundle, but that it's all about application. But let me pick up this point, right? And also what Ramon said just before, right? Business continuity has not worked out. I mean, business continuity management means we prepare for crises that are not happening once, but several times, right? And to make sure that there's something like a basic operation that can go on for a certain company, for example, after a fire of one factory or so, right? Business continuity management that many companies have is not meant to prepare for the black swan. I have many people who are working in that field, and it's not that they have been doing a bad job. Let me say that global and distributed supply chains, I mean, we have them for good reasons. We have complex supply chains because we have concentrated expertise in the world. It's all about availability and economies of scale, large production volumes, wage levels, material and energy cost. And companies nowadays have to make the trade-off between efficiency, and Peter already mentioned the Green Deal about between sustainability, human decent workplaces, and now also resilience and at the end cost, right? So that is a big challenge. And I have to say also, I'm very happy that we have this ad hoc supply chains for medical equipment relying on 3D printing technology. There won't be a major change in the structure of the supply chains as long as we want to have best products at lowest prices, right? And so only if politics is doing something about that, or if the consumers decide that they want to pay more for a certain type of product, which we can see, for example, for local food, right? We can have even regional food and the discounters, right? There we see a local production growing, but otherwise we will have these distributed supply chains as long as the companies are focusing or have to focus on cost decrease and efficiency increase.
Natural. I would agree with you. Let's give Peter a chance to respond to that as well, and then handing back the second question.
Thank you very much. So do we do enough on adoption? I think that's a very important point. And we need to differentiate. What we have seen now and the lessons learned is that we need to build more on existing results and of projects, whether funded at the EU level or at national or whatever level, in order to get quicker impact and results. We have lost the luxury of time in doing research and innovation. And that is not only true for COVID, it's also true for the Green Deal and the climate emergency. And that has several implications for the way we program and for the way we link up with results and for the way we share results. And there is a strong commitment from the EU for the response to the COVID crisis to make data available, to share better. The acceleration of sharing science and results is an important element, I think, an important lesson we are learning now. At the same time, I would caution against putting now everything on application. We also need to feed the pipeline and continue investing in the frontiers of our knowledge. To use an example of 3D, and Ramon's example is so illustrative on how quickly 3D has been able to repurpose and provide a solution. But if we really want to get 3D printing out of the current still, I wouldn't say niche, but limited use in factories and go to mass production, we need more research on materials. It's fundamental. And so we shouldn't lose that balance in the overall picture. But to come back to this call, which we will publish this week, and I hope many of you will be having a look and bid for it, we make an explicit link saying, a reference, link your proposal to results already on the market in order to be faster with the impact.
Marilyn, to you for our second question from the audience.
Yep. It's an open question. I don't know. It's a bit connected to what you said, Peter, but I don't know who would respond. So what would you recommend to EU countries only at the start of industrial transition and Industry 4.0 with low level of digitalization while also dealing with serious economic recession?
Not an easy question to answer, but I kind of like Ramon. I think I just throw this one at you. I don't know why, but maybe you have a couple of thoughts as recommendations. Now, as a business, of course, you want to grow markets. Sure. And you want to make sure people understand the benefits that it has to bet on, to make the right bets. Let me phrase it like that. Yeah. Kind of, what's your thought around that question?
My thought is in a different layers, and also complementing the previous question. The first thing, being very, very pragmatic, we need to think on the next months on what is the economic situation of companies. And what we'll see is that companies will have a problem of treasury, a problem of liquidity. And this is something that needs to be think about at business level, how do we provide financing, but also at national, at European level, how do we help our customers and our companies to be able to do capital investments in this current environment where they will be financially challenged, and the risk level they may want to take is different. But this puts also some opportunities also to rethink national production, and especially in some strategic areas. As Julia says, it's 3D printing needs, and in general, distributed manufacturing needs to be able to compete head-to-head in economics. And basically, in many cases, we are ready. We are investing. Peter also said it in more technology to be able to be even more competitive in cost. But there are some sectors that needs to be strategic, and national production is important, that is kept for certain areas. Now, the one that I wanted to mention and double click is in application development. Once we actually advance in technology, application development is so important, especially for small and medium-sized businesses. Big companies have the resources, they have their innovation departments, they actually do this all the time. Small and medium-sized businesses need help. And the best tool I've seen so far are actually the hubs, 3D hubs. 3D hubs that are actually independent. They actually have a range of technologies, and basically they help this small and medium-sized company that can first visualize what does it mean to have a additive manufacturing production line or industry 4.0 production line. Visualization is very, very important, but also help for their specific application to figure out which is the best technology, which is the best material, which is the best post-processing technology, which is the best quality assurance. Help them also to do the analysis of business case. What will be the return on investment of all of this? Does it make sense? Doesn't make sense? And once they've done all this, help them on training their operators, training their engineers to think of design for additive, even train their supply chain and operation professionals on think different about supply chain. So there's many things that need to happen. I'm a great fan of 3D Hubs as an independent, sometimes foundations to help this, especially small and medium-sized businesses.
I want to check with Julia too at this point, but let me just do one quick follow-up question. Those hubs, should they be, I mean, is it industry through their associations that sets it up independently, or do you think governments should push it and should make sure those things are
there is actually very different setups. The ones that are more familiar is actually they have started as an industry association, and even many competitors actually putting together certain things to help again the industry. Once this is done, actually governments actually take notice and they help. From another side, from the European level, there is actually a big effort on helping hubs to be served. So I think that there needs to be this dual dynamic from an industry, basically, how we can do this thing much more dynamic from the European level, basically how they can help to set up this network of hubs.
Thank you. And Julia, certainly, I mean, Fraunhofer has always been a go-to place for companies to learn about what's new and what's in the making, and experience it also at a scale that is meaningful to them, that they can relate to. I'm sure you have a couple of thoughts on that as well, what Ramon said.
Yeah, I have some thoughts, and I would like to pick up what Marilyn and also Ramon said, because we have also a digital innovation hub here in Magdeburg at the Fraunhofer. So we are in very close contact with, in particular, small and medium-sized companies. And what I can report from many conversations with those is, I mean, I think the first thing that we have to do together is communication, right? Communication about digitalization, because we need transparency about cause and effects, but we need clear rules. We have to make sure to people that machines will not take over the lead, right? There's still people are afraid. The second thing is companies need stability, right, to make their investments. I already mentioned that that companies have difficulties in that. The next thing, and also Ramon mentioned that, is we will have to change our education systems. I mean, you refer to training, but it's also about education. Think of all the topics that we had today, right? Risk management, sustainability, lifelong learning, IT, engineering, management, business models you just mentioned, Ramon. So I think that has to go naturally together in the education systems, and because we still have engineers trained and management people trained, risk engineers trained. So I think we have to move closer together when we deal with disruptions, crisis, and in particular with the Green Deal. So we have, as we already said, we have, and I totally agree with you, Peter, we need both basic research and applied research. I think that goes hand in hand. And the last thing that I think is important and that we see in the work in our Digital Innovation Hub is we have to get the companies where they are, no matter where they are. And we have to offer also research opportunities to those companies who are maybe still at Industry 2.0. And we have to make sure that we take care of them and bring them to those advanced technologies, because otherwise, Ramon said that the big companies, they have their innovation department, but we lose the small ones and the medium-sized companies, and I'm a bit afraid of that. And so I really appreciate that we have support there, for example, by means of the Digital Innovation Hubs.
Thank you very much. I think that plea to look at the smaller companies is an important one. The larger ones have, for a variety of reasons, they have naturally more resiliency built in to an extent. And we don't have to go into the details why that is. The smaller ones can even be just overlooked simply, right? If they are getting in trouble, there's fewer people and fewer, I would say, large institutions and organizations carrying. And I think that's an important piece to keep in mind. It is about, in a sense, everybody. And the small companies are so critical for employment as well. So we got to make sure we cover the full spectrum. Let me get back to Marilyn. Is there another question from the audience?
I have plenty.
Oh, you have plenty. Oh, gosh, you got to pick one.
For 2 hours. No, I'm watching the time, so maybe I'll pick one. Well, how to ensure a united Europe-wide or even global approach to manufacturing while facing pressures from individual government to act at the national level?
Is that a question to Peter, first and foremost, and then to whoever wants to comment? With a quick answer. The faster we answer, the more questions we can squeeze in. Peter, what's your thought?
Okay, it's a very important question. And we can take courage from the digital innovation hubs. The success of these hubs is that it is a coordinated action with member states. It's EU signal and funding, but it's member state driven. And I think we have to do the same as regards manufacturing. So as part of the response to COVID, we have created a group, an action plan together with member states. And under this action plan, we have a group on manufacturing, currently focused and chaired by our DG Santé, so the health department of the Commission. And I'm participating, where we coordinate action with member states. And the first step on this is, what are the current production facilities? What are the current capacities? That is the first step before we can go into repurposing and adaptation. So very important point, where we have some good examples we can draw on.
Thank you. Julia, quick question from the research perspective. Do you see, or do you have a concern that we see more focus and more pressure on local rather than maybe the previous way of being all global and working with the best no matter where they were? Do you think that's a risk to the research ecosystem almost?
I don't know, but I am also a researcher at the university, and there I'm not only doing applied research. So one of my fascinating research questions, and that is also really making my heart beat, and Peter already mentioned the EU-Africa cooperation, is like, I think we have to go even a step further, right? We do innovation research. We then do lighthouse projects, often with big companies. We have already talked about that. We have to bring that to the small and medium-sized enterprises. But now I really think we have to do another step. We have then managed to bring our European knowledge about innovation, about application, about new business models to the developing countries. And so I definitely think we have to think globally.
Thank you very much. Ramon, from a business standpoint, I mean, companies like yours that sell product around the world have certainly benefited from the openness that we had so far. And it's a question to what extent there's going to be a refocusing in individual countries about, hey, me first, my country first, right? I might have been losing out in this crisis, must never happen again. I got to take care of myself first. From a company standpoint, especially in industrial manufacturing, how do you see that? Is that a real risk for you, or would you say, I think we're going to get back to normal to a normal operation sometime soon?
It's a great question, and we've seen actually a big change going and pedaling back from globalization. We started with the tariffs wars, and now all this is probably going to be even exacerbating this. And this actually has two risks. It's one that is negative. I mean, everything that probably that stops this movement, free movement of goods and worldwide trade is not good. From another side, it's also true that actually this might spark also some distributed manufacturing and basically communities willing to invest in coming back to be autonomous. So you have these balances of pros and cons. Nobody knows where we are going to end up. The thing I think that we need to focus in any case is on the advantages for people or communities that adopt first. I think that there is a big first mover advantage that sometimes we foresee. At the end, all the thing that we're talking about is about digitization of the process of production. And we've seen basically what digitization does to the different verticals or market that has. We've seen basically how this digitalization has changed totally who are the winners or losers, on who makes money on things like content creation. Now, you apply this to manufacturing and the different manufacturing verticals, and we've seen already some value chains that have been disintermediated. And there is people that before were adding value, and now they're disintermediated. We've seen in the dental world, as 3D printing comes to the dental world, the dentists are now being disintermediated, and there's a direct connection between consumers and basically companies that actually does for instance, braces. On footwear is the same. We are seeing the part of podiatrists with a big risk of being disintermediated. So all the value chains being now digitized or have the potential being digitized, have the potential to be disrupted on who are the value creation and who are the value capture players. And so this is a part that we need to look, and again, here is a first mover advantage, and there is an implication on whether the economy continues to be global or local, all of this. So there's many pieces moving around.
Very good. Let me ask you and also Julia before handing over to Peter, just for a very quick answer. When I mentioned the example of universities, one president told me, what it would have taken 5 years, we did in, well, I mean, they say we did it in 4 weeks, but let's say we did it this year, in a sense. Your perspective on what would have taken 5 years in industry in terms of transformation and capitalizing on the opportunities, will it be 1 year, will it be 2, or will it be just 4 years rather than 5? Because things are just slower out there. What do you think? Just a quick gut feel from you, Ramon.
I think this will accelerate for sure. Actually, we have our own predictions on basically how the industry will recover, and now additive manufacturing industry, and we are predicting that this industry will recover 1 year before the rest of industrial capital equipment. So that's our.
All right, thank you. Julia, what's your view? The accelerator, the crisis as an accelerator, as tragic as it is, but also taking that as an opportunity, how much will it accelerate things? What do you think? It's a gut feel, no more than that, but let us know.
It will accelerate things, definitely. I see that in my daily life. With digital conferences, and also in university, it will give it a big push. We have been few people who have used digital lectures before and then spent, let's say, lifetime with the students with discussions. But now everyone is doing that. And I think that will give a big push to our education system too.
As well, certainly. Peter, of course, your expectation is that things will accelerate now under the pressure that we have. Give us your perspective on the way forward, if you will, of industrial R&D, the funding situation, and also the technologies.
Yeah, I'm tempted to start by saying how much it has accelerated the way we work in the Commission digitally. Let's not forget that the President, von der Leyen, has introduced a paperless Commission, only digital. A little revolution. She did that when she took office in December, and now it helps the Commission to work in the current situation of confinement. So I would agree that we see with Julia and Ramon that we see an acceleration of trends. We do see how important it is, not only science and research innovation, but also the manufacturing base. And this is positive. We see, every citizen sees how much we depend and how vulnerable we are. I would hasten to add that we should not close down now our openness and come back to the idea of a fortress Europe We have benefited so much from these high specialization, diversification of supply chains, value chains, and our openness. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. And last point, which is also a barrier if we don't get it right. A very important point Julia made about the education and training. We need to become digital naturals, and not only the young generation, but across all ages. Otherwise, we will not have the speed which is needed.
Very good. Thank you. I think our time is up here. I want to very sincerely thank our three panelists, Julia, Peter, and Ramon. I want to thank my co-moderator, Marilyn, for also getting questions in from the audience. Thanks to the audience for your interest. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. There's going to be more issues of this series of webcasts. And we all wish you a great further day.
Thank you very much.